Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zayn Nabbi. I'm broadcasting today from Durban, South Africa, my hometown, hence the beautiful wall with African memorabilia and a few other items you might recognize. I'll move my shoulder, the wonderful vuvuzelas and the makarapa, all there for you to enjoy. Joining me on the pod today around Africa's biggest braai is Alasdair Howorth. How are you, my brother? How are things? I was going to say in the land of the long white cloud, but that's New Zealand. How are things in the land of perpetual rain?
It feels like that, Zayn. I'm not gonna lie. Yesterday I woke up and I could hardly see like 10 meters because of the fog and the clouds. It's miserable. No, I'm good. I'm back in the UK after spending a month in East Africa. I've kind of returned with some of my memorabilia. I'm wearing my Yanga shirt, which I picked up when I went to the Kariako Derby.
I guess I've got sort of Simba colors here.
Yeah, there you go. We always have to make sure we're balancing because otherwise we'll be in a lot of trouble from our Tanzanian brothers and sisters. No, I'm doing well. It's good to be back on the pod. It's been a long time.
Feels like it, right?
Yeah, it really does. And I'm sad to say I've scared off Courtney and Francis, but one day I'll get on when they're both here.
Just when I promised I would be doing this pod from the continent. Well, Ali, it's good to have you here. There's certainly lots to sink our teeth into around the CAF Champions League and, of course, the CAF Confederations Cup, both coming to the business end of those tournaments. I think given I'm in South Africa, given Sundwons play today, they're on the cusp of winning South Africa's Premier Soccer League. They're undefeated in the league. Again, another fantastic domestic campaign. And they could win it tonight if they beat Kaiser Chiefs. Stellenbosch FC holding on to second place, not giving them an easy finish, but most certainly this is just a minor setback on their coronation to the crown here. However, Alasdair, there might be South African champs in waiting. There might be African Football League champions. But once again, knocked out in the CAF Champions League semi-finals, this time against Esperance. Courtney favored that to happen. He said they're a team you don't want to get in a knockout rounds. What was your watching of both legs, particularly honing in on the second leg that they lost at home?
Well, first of all, it was hard to watch because the game actually got paused halfway through it for over an hour because of the rain and lightning in Pretoria. In fact, I think some lightning struck the stadium and some of the lights went out. So, it was hard to watch, to be honest, because we actually ended up having the game paused. But fortunately, they were able to resume after a little over an hour and play out. I mean, it's like you said, it's same old Mamelodi Sundowns. It feels like the exact same kind of an exact same repetition of what happened last season at this very stage. Last season they went to Wydad, got a brilliant draw away from home, but conceded the away goals.
And this is where I'll come in just to interact a little bit, Ali. I mean, do you think this is weak legs or weak mind, or both?
It's knockout football, and so it's unlike a league football. There's so many more variables, and so it's hard to put the blame. I'm seeing a lot of fans being like, "This is Rulani's fault. You spent 200 million rand, and he still can't do it." And I think there's an element of there's probably an element of that. There's probably an element of not quite managing the game super well. There's criticisms over keeping, Peter Shalulule, even though Tarek Matthews had been brilliant in the midweek and Shalulule missed so many great chances. But I mean, there's no doubting that he's one of the best center forwards on the continent. And so, it's hard to say if he should or shouldn't be playing. Again, I feel like I always want to try and avoid doing this, but it's kind of impossible with Rulani. But it just feels like, once again, he's just mirroring Pep Guardiola because, completely dominant on the home front. Like you said, they're looking like they're probably going to get an undefeated season. In the PSL, they look completely dominant. One of the best domestic teams in the history of African football. And yet, in these big knockout ties, they really, really struggle. Whether it's been against Wydad or against Petro or against Esperance. And again, at home, it felt like the exact same as against Wydad last season, where completely dominant, creating loads and loads of chances, and then they concede one of the silliest goals, just a kind of long ball over the top. It bounces, a defender loses out in the header, and suddenly Wydad or Esperance are away, and they score, and it's a great finish. Don't get me wrong; it's a lovely finish from Buchniwa, but it's again, we're at this stage where we're saying Sundowns are struggling, and what is funny is because we can't say look, they can't do it in the knockout rounds because, as you alluded to earlier,
Hmm.
they have done it
Hmm.
in the African Football League. And yes, the
Sure.
African Football League is at this point in time still a bit of a joke, not as serious a competition. But the teams that were in it were taking it seriously. It's not like
Sure.
It's not like it was a friendly tournament or anything. Um, the one thing I would point out is of the four semifinalists, Sundowns were the only team to play a midweek game between the Champions League semifinals. And I think that does impact them. Yes, they have a hugely deep squad where they can rotate and they can change things, but let we always have to drive home this point. Like the travel involved in
Yeah.
African football, even domestic football, the distances that Sundowns have to travel. But when you go onto the continent, for them to go to Tunis, it's not a direct 6 hour flight, which in of itself would be
Sure.
grim. It's a 19 hours worth of traveling as you're going to via, Turkey, via Qatar, wherever. And so I think the fact that they have a midweek game, even though they can rotate players, even though they can change things, there's still 4 or 5 players playing in the game. You still have to take the whole team there. So I think for me, that can't be underestimated as well, how that impact. Look, I'm not making excuses. I think the fact, I'm not saying Sundowns should have won that semifinal because I think Esperance were good. They were defensively solid and they won 1-0 at home. They did the job. But the fact that Sundowns didn't score a goal over 2 legs and lost both legs. Yeah, I think that was Sundowns' first home loss in
Mm.
Pretoria for 39 games. So I think that's where it's like, okay, it's one thing to get knocked out, but to be knocked out in the second leg at home for the second time in a row, there have to be big questions over the Sundowns teams. But yeah, let's not take away from Esperance because it was a brilliant performance from them in terms of the defensive side of things. And oh
Yeah.
my goodness, their goalkeeper, I just want to say quickly, Amanella
Sure.
Miche, he's kept a clean sheet, I think, in every single CAF Champions League game bar one. I think he's kept something close to like 13 clean sheets in the Tunisian league. He has been in terrific form. He's only like 21, 22, young player. And so I think, in fact, I think he might even be younger. I think he's 20. So the fact that he's stepped into this Esperance team and has been brilliant, I just want to kind of quickly give him flowers. Keeping 2 clean sheets against Sundowns is no joke.
No, absolutely. And this Esperance team is also one that's undergone change. I mean, there's a new coach who's been at the helm for a short frame of time.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I guess you could point that to another example of where Sundowns have struggled because it was the exact same against Wydad. We had Sven Vanderbroek coming in, but yeah, Jose Cardozo has come in, or Jose Cardozo, I think he's
Sure.
Portuguese, so it'd be Jose. Has come in, but I think he only came in January, and yeah, he's turned things around because Esperance haven't had a great season domestically.
Yep.
Obviously,
Yep.
last season they didn't win the league title for the first time in I think 4 years. Etul Sahel won it, and so this hasn't been a good Esperance side over the last kind of, I would say, 1 to 2 years. They've lost some really key players like Mohamed Ben Ramadan, some of these kind of players who were really a big part of the team that won back-to-back titles, but then have kind of been regular semifinalists. So for them to come back kind of in a short space of time to reach the final, yes, they'll be underdogs to Ahly, but I think they've done really, really well because at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have pegged them as making it to the semifinals, let alone the final.
Sure. And I mean, you look at it now, we have an all North African tie in the final. Obviously, Esperance making it after knocking out Sundowns. And the Giants, the kings of the continent, Al Ali doing the business against TP Mazembe. I was, I think, the only romantic who felt like Mazembe could have gone and got a result in Cairo. More romance than heart and heart than brain in that one. But I mean, when you look at this tie, the way many of the pundits would have called it, pretty much went to plan for Al Ahly. Would you agree, Ali?
Yeah, I mean, look, Zayd, you weren't the only one who was hoping for a Mazembe. I was trying to figure out. I was hoping that it would be a Mazembe Sundowns final, just so that we could have an all sub-Saharan final, because I don't think we've had one of those in years. I think
Wow, I don't.
2009, I think, was the last time Mazembe played against. I think it was Heartland from Nigeria. But even before, until that, I've just pulled up the list now, and you think you'd have to go back to the 90s before that. So
Yeah.
for me, not that I have anything against our North African brothers and sisters, I
No.
love them, but I was hoping for some refreshing changes and to see the final in sub-Saharan. But yeah, look, essentially it comes down to Al Ahly played the
Mm-hmm.
semi-final better. Mazembe. Mazembe, I think really what this comes down to is Mazembe missed their chance at home. Right, they were the better team at home. They created loads of chances. They had lots of opportunities to score, and they didn't. And Al Ahly showed in the second leg. They eventually broke them down. But I mean, the margins were very fine. I think it was Jolbea had a goal disallowed early in the second half for Mazembe, and if he scores that, that's an away goal. Suddenly, Al Ahly are in huge, huge problems. But I think it just points to, look, this Mazembe side is really good defensively, really physical, really athletic. But they really struggle to create chances. They don't have much creativity. They don't have much kind of technical prowess going forward. And I think that's where they got hurt. And Al Ahly, they've got quality. And I think, again, shout out to Ali Maaloul, who's 2 assists from left back. I think he's like, in his early 30s now, but he has been, and I think he will go down as one of the best fullbacks, best left backs on the continent. For club and country, he has been fantastic. And yeah, again, to be a left back at his age, still bombing down, and his assist for I think it was the second goal. What a ball. Like kind of one of those almost Kevin De Bruyne-esque crosses where it's like you're crossing from deep and it kind of whips around the kind of the center backs and Abu Ali then kind of with a lovely first time kind of volleyed finish. But yeah, I think it ultimately came down to that. Al Ahly were the better side, not over 2 legs, but they were the side that managed the 2 legs better.
Sure. And now when you we're certainly going to look forward to a cracking final, but I think before we start to sort of gaze into that crystal ball, it might be worth mentioning, Ali, the fact that we know the 4 qualifiers now for the FIFA Club World Cup, which will be taking place next year. Do you want to run our listeners / viewers through the runners and riders there?
Yeah, so how it's worked is it's the winners of the last previous CAF Champions League, and then if there haven't been 4 unique winners, then it then goes to the team with the highest CAF coefficient points over that time. And so we knew it was going to be Esperance, Wydad, and Al Ahly, but we were waiting on whether TP Mazembe could win it this time, and if they won it, then Sundowns would be put out of contention. But thanks to Al Ahly, despite Sundowns having a torrid time on the same night, they have qualified for the FIFA Club World Cup next year. As you said, they're the four clubs, and I think it's fair. I think these are the 4 best clubs over the last 4 years. I don't think they've all, bar Al Ahly, have been in that top 4 over the 4 years. I would say Wydad this season have been dreadful. They're not even going to qualify for the CAF Champions League next season. Whereas Esperance, like we said last season, weren't at it. Sundowns, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago were still dominating in the PSL, but weren't looking great. Whereas now I think they're probably in the top 2 or 3 teams consistently in the continent. So I think it's deserving, but I think for me, it's really exciting. I was at the Club World Cup last year in Morocco and watched Al Ahly lose to Real Madrid, but I think and for me, seeing them play against Real Madrid was brilliant. And I think it's going to be so exciting to see all 4 of these teams get to play against the likes of, Man City, Real Madrid. Suddenly there's so much excitement. I think Chelsea are one of the other ones qualified. And so for me, I'm buzzing for this. I think there are big questions over how it impacts African club football, obviously, because I think the money on offer is staggering. I think it's 50 million just to participate in the Club World Cup. And bear in mind, I think the CAF Champions League prize money is like 4 million or 5 million. So
which we're talking dollars here, and all of this is big bucks considering what you get in local prize money.
Yeah. And so the fact that I think there are concerns over the fact that, I think particularly Sundowns and Al Ahly, Wydad and Esperance, or to a lesser extent, have so much more spending power over the rest of their leagues already, thinking particularly of Sundowns in the PSL, no team can compete with them financially. Suddenly you give them $50 million plus extra to play with. And oh my goodness. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's, I'm really excited for the Club World Cup, but I think there are big questions over how it will impact African football. And I think there's worries that, at the next Club World Cup in 2029 or whenever, it's going to be the exact same 4 teams because they'll come back with $50 million to play with and suddenly no one else can compete with them. So I think so it was a small win on a night when Sundowns did have a big loss. I think they can be comforted by the fact that they're going to get $50 million and get to play in the Club World Cup.
Well, listen, before we sort of cast our attention on the CAF Confederations Cup, when you look at the way it's shaping up for the final, and I know we'll do this in greater depth ahead of the games. I mean, how do you see it going in the build up to it? Which of these teams? I mean, is there any looking past Al Ahly being the outright favourites? I mean, this is Widad. They know how to win cup games. But yeah, what's your early read on how the finals, the two-legged final will shake out?
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. It's Al Ahly will be the favorites. I think it doesn't help that Al Ahly will be the home side in the second leg because I think we know that there's an advantage of playing in the second leg. I think there's a few things that make me feel like maybe there's hope for Esperance. I think a big thing is Al Ahly's schedule. So they're already 5 games behind in playing in the Egyptian Premier League. So I think if you look at it, I'm just pulling it up right now. If you look at the Egyptian Premier League, Al Ahly are in 11th. Which is kind of crazy. But then you look, matches played. They're 5 matches behind Pyramids in first and 7 matches behind Al Masry in second. So if they win all of their games, they will go into first. But I think that's good for Esperance. So there's pressure on Al Ahly. They have to play catch up in a lot of these games. Whereas Esperance are fully caught up in the championship section of the Tunisian league. They're in first. They're actually doing well. They're on track to win the Tunisian league. But I think it's going to be tricky for Esperance. I think, Al Ahly have just shown that they can just do the business, and I think, there were questions whether they would be able to keep up that dominance once Pizzo left. Marcel Koller has come in and has been brilliant. If anything, he's taken them a step further in terms of their development. And, you think even coming through to the semifinal, they're missing so many players through injury, and yet they have these other players who can step up. I think Mohamed Abdelmanem, who's been one of the best center backs in Africa over the last few years. I've already mentioned Ali Maghloul. Percy Tau is, for all his inconsistencies and frustrations, potentially in a Bafana shirt at the AFCON, he's still brilliant. And I think he scored yesterday as well in their win in the league. So I think, Al Ahly have to be the heavy favorites. I think for Esperance, they have to get a result in Tunis in a couple of weeks. Because if they, Al Ahly have shown in the Mazembe game, if they can take a clean sheet in the opening game home, take them to Cairo, and suddenly they're going to dominate. And one thing I do also want to point out is in Cairo, we saw almost a full stadium, which is super rare given the political situation in Egypt, and also such a joy. I mean, Al Ahly,
Sure.
for all their dominance, still have some of the best fans in the world. As do Esperance. And so I think for me, that's exciting.
Off the charts.
Exactly. So looking forward to it. I think it's going to be brilliant Champions League final. I think it's going to be close. Like we said, Esperance know how to do it. Even though they've been the underdogs against Sundowns, they did the job. They know how to get these results. But you have to say Al Ahly are the favorites because they're in great form. They're a great team. And as they've shown over the last 4 years, every single time they know how to get it done.
Sure. And listen, Ali, we'll certainly sink our teeth more into that the closer we get. But it would be remiss of me not to mention the CAF Confederations Cup. Obviously, Africa's second-tier competition, but one not to be winced at either. You've been also following that and tracking the developments there. Nice open-ended question. How do you see it going now that we're in the business end of this competition?
Well, let me tell you, Zayn, I think the CAF Confederation Cup is even better than the Champions League. There's so much more storylines and chaos,
Unpredictability.
Exactly. I remember doing a story a couple of years ago on FC being a second division Malian side that were 90 minutes away from qualifying for the regular stage of the Confederation Cup. So I think there's so much more. And we've had that, again, kind of extracurricular nonsense creeping into the football. So I'm talking, of course, of the semi-final between holders USM Algier and RS Berkane, who won 2 of the previous 3 titles. So 2 of the best teams in the competition. Moroccan Algerians, huge match coming in the semi-finals. But we were denied the chance to see them because of what happened off the pitch. So a brief synopsis, and I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible, is Berkane came into Algeria. They came into Algiers and their kits were confiscated by Algerian authorities. The players were let through. So I think there's been a lot of reporting that they were held hostage in the airport. That's not true. They came through, but they decided to stay in in the airport until they got their kit. They were told they were get their kit. They weren't given their kit, and so the next day they had to go and play, but they refused to play because they didn't have their original shirts. Now, the reason their kits were confiscated was there's a lot of tension between Morocco and Algeria. They've kind of ended all diplomatic relations. For more details on that, I actually wrote an article about that. I'll link that in the description. But there's a lot of history between Algeria and Morocco, and I don't feel fully qualified to explain all of it, but there's a lot of tension. And on Aris Barkane's shirt is a map of Morocco, but importantly, it is not the official map of Morocco that's recognized by the United Nations, by the international community. It is the map of Morocco that includes what they would call the southern provinces, but what the rest of the world would call Western Sahara, which is a semi-autonomous region that is currently governed by Morocco, but wants independence, and it's very politically contentious. And Algeria have supported a lot of the kind of revolutionary movements, the Polisario rebels in Western Sahara, to kind of fight for their freedom from Morocco. And so the Algerian authorities took the kits. They provided them with an identical kit, but with the map removed. And that's why Aris Barkane refused to wear them. Now, there's a lot of hearsay. There's a lot of kind of bad blood between the countries, between the clubs now, really sadly. But what this ultimately comes down to is if you look at the FIFA statutes, if you look at CAF statutes, clubs are not allowed to wear maps on their shirts. Countries aren't allowed to wear maps on their shirts. I think it's Article 10.3.6.
So it's pretty clear cut, right?
It's pretty clear cut. Now, there have been countries that have worn their flags. So I think even at the AFCON, I think Cape Verde, Mauritania, they both on their kits had flags, and CAF let them get away with it. So I think a lot of people pointed to that and saying, look, it's clear cut, but it also isn't. But I would also say in response to that, FIFA and CAF, especially FIFA, have cracked down on any clubs or countries that have shirts that are remotely controversial. So, there's FC Palestina in South America, I think in Chile, who have a flag of Palestine on their shirt. They've been sanctioned by FIFA. I think when Ukraine national team had a flag that included Crimea, they were told they couldn't wear it by FIFA. So there is precedent where saying, if there's any controversy of the map, you're not allowed to wear it. So really, Aris Barkane should never have been able to wear this map of Morocco because it is a controversial map. Whether Moroccans want it to be or think it should be, blah, 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 leave your politics aside, it shouldn't be allowed because it is controversial. So ultimately, I think it comes down to the fact that CAF allowed Aris Barkane to wear these shirts. And I think that's a huge problem, that the CAF should never have let them wear them. But they did, and so then they told USM Algiers and the Algerian authorities saying, look, this is the shirt that we sanctioned. You have to let them play. The Algerians didn't, and so CAF sanctioned them. So Aris Barkane are going through in the return leg. The USMA said traveled to Morocco, but they said if they wear those shirts, we're not going to play. They wore those shirts, they didn't play. So they were USM Algiers are in the final and were awarded that. I think the Algerians have gone to CAS, the Court for Arbitration of Sport. And I think they've been rejected. And so we're at a stage where they might not get further sanctions from CAF, but it's just left a lot of bad blood in the air.
Yeah,
it's completely left a lot of Algerians and a lot of other Africans saying that, once again, CAF is giving favoritism to Morocco. It leaves a lot of Moroccans feeling like they're being attacked by a lot of other Africans and by Algerians. And so, it's once again, it's just like CAF having no foresight to saying, look, this team from Morocco has a shirt that has a very controversial map on it. Maybe we shouldn't let them wear it.
Sure.
And then for some reason, they just say they can because they don't think these things through. And we're now in the situation we are. So now, sadly, USM Algiers had been denied the chance to defend their title. Now, having said that, Aris Barkane are a brilliant side. They could have won the tie anyway. And they're in the final against Zamalek, another huge giant of African football. Really, really struggling in the Egyptian league. Zamalek, I think they're 3 points behind Al Ahly, so they're actually in 12th, but they've played one extra game. So if they win other games at hand, they'll still be in the top 3 or 4 teams, but They haven't been having a great time. There's a reason why they're in the Confederation Cup and not the Champions League, because they didn't come in the top 2 last season. But they thrashed Dreams FC of Ghana 3-0 in the second leg after drawing the first 0-0. So I think it's still going to be an excellent final. Having a tie in Barkane, having a match in Cairo again. It's going to be a brilliant CAF Confederation Cup final, really one that RS Berkane aren't quite at the Champions League level, but Zamalek are. So I think
Sure.
it's going to be a really comparable final to the Champions League final. But, and forgive me for going on a massive monologue, it's been quite messy in the way that we've gotten there, which is a real shame.
Absolutely. And I think, Ahly, you've done a great job in breaking it all down. And it would be pretty crazy, but not improbable, if we have two champions on the continent from Cairo. And two of the biggest rivals there. And again, another game that we will get on into a little bit more depth close to the time. Ahly, thank you for your breakdown. Thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. I'm in Durban, so hopefully we'll do one more pod from here. Maybe, just maybe, I'm promising to be on the beach, just for the purposes of transporting our viewers and listeners to the location, not to rub it in, Ahly. But no.
To be fair, Zayn, I don't know if I want to be on a Durban beach in winter.
It's 24 degrees, baby. It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, very good. Actually, Durban beach in winter is better than Edinburgh beach in summer.
I'm not sure how swimmable the local water is, but it's very picturesque. Ahly, love my time with you. Thank you for the breakdown, and we'll chop it up soon together.